Good morning, everybody, and happy Saturday to you. And yeah, welcome to our panel discussion this morning. And today we are going to be talking about grief, processing grief during the holidays in a healthy way. And today I have my guest up here to talk about it with me, and hopefully you guys are tuning in. And if this is your first time, do me a favor, go over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, and hit that bell notification so you guys be notified every time we drop a new episode. So before we get started, I'm gonna let my guests introduce themselves. Hope.
Good morning. My name is Hope Rigger. I am the creator and founder of Grief to Hope, which is now a nonprofit organization that I run in honor of my son, who I lost to murder in 2016. I run a free support program. It's a 7-week grief program that I run continuously throughout the year. As well as a published author. So I'm just grateful to be here and ready to share.
Yeah. Lisa?
Hi, my name is Lisa, and I am a proud mother of two daughters, and I live in the UK, even though I don't sound like it. I am the owner of Holistic Life Coaching with Lisa Marie, and I am a life coach and a grief educator, and I speak about grief, trauma, healing, hope. And I have a podcast called Because We Love Finding Meaning After Loss podcast. In between 2018 and 2019, I lost 12 loved ones through death. My parents, my son-in-law, friends' children. So it was quite a complex compound grief time. I'm really happy to be here. It's good to see you again, Tony.
Yes. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And I am Tony Lynch. I am the founder of Memories of Us, Grief Support for Men, and also the Global Grief Network. I am also the host of this podcast, Grief Let's Talk About It. And so while we're here, let's start it off. Grieving during the holidays, processing and moving through in a healthy way. Who wants to start off with it?
I think I'll jump in. One of the things that we've talked about, I actually am in the midst of a program. We had a actual meetup on Thanksgiving, and I had quite a few people there, which was just amazing that they took the time out from their busy family day or their hectic day, emotional day. Is that the first thing with holidays is all the triggers for me. It's all those memories that spark. It's all those times and memories of shared. Um, and one of the things that I think is troublesome is we have those family units that don't want to talk about it, that don't want to share, that don't want to acknowledge the grief, especially if it's newer. And so I think one of the biggest things is to set yourself up for the holidays. What I mean by that is prepare for the days, prepare to say no, right? If you don't feel you're up to that meeting time, that holiday season, and if it's fresh and new, I know I did not participate in Thanksgiving that first year. It's okay to say no. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do holidays this year, or I'm not going to celebrate this year or be around family. So, one, you have to take back control of the holidays and what you feel comfortable and what you can handle. Second is to pre-position it. And that is where you can call the host, or if you're the host, set expectations. What do you want to accomplish? What do you not want to do? What do you feel okay doing? Do you feel okay talking about it? Do you not feel okay talking about it? And express that with the host, or if you are the host with your company, so that there's some guidelines set. Because I think the worst problem with holidays is no one wants to stir the sadness, right? No one wants to bring on the sadness or create more sadness as we go through the holidays. And I think a lot of people think ignoring the grief helps. And it's actually, for most, it's the opposite. They want to acknowledge the grief. They want to acknowledge the loved one. They want to set that table, put that chair up for that loved one that they're missing, talk about them, share memories, and just be in it, be in the moment. So those are a couple of things that I try to highlight. Say one, prepare yourself, agree to say no, and set expectations.
Okay. Lisa, you want to piggyback off that?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Hope, especially if you've lost loved ones around the holiday season. So for me, we lost our 24-year-old son-in-law on the 30th of November 4 years ago, and his funeral was the 23rd of December. So, of course, not only was that year hideous, and we were all just holding on. But every year after, like Hope said, there's this activation, there's this triggering, there's these memories, and we all have it. So, one, I think everyone just who is suffering and grieving need to just be, as we say, kind to ourselves. But what does that mean? That means allowing yourself to feel what you feel. It is completely normal. Grief is a lonely road, but you don't have to do it alone. And just what Hope was saying, we want to talk about our loved ones usually. So it may feel uncomfortable for the person who is hearing it, but I always say we have to remember that it's not about them, it's about you. So that person who is listening, they need to remember it's not about them, it's about the person that they're supporting. And the holidays are this time where families and friends get together and there's Santa. And my dad used to play Santa, quite literally looked like Santa Claus. So anytime I would see Santa, it was a trigger. And yet I couldn't even look at those photos. And I just had to be okay with that. And then as the years have gone on, since it's nearly 5 years, I'm able to look at those photos. So it's interesting too, depending on the loss, how you deal with it. So you may want to talk about it, but you may not want to. And that to me, like Hope said, is okay in setting those boundaries and being okay to say, no, not this year. Not this year. We're not celebrating.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that because my son, he was born December 18th, 7 days before Christmas. And so holidays are used to be pretty tough. Well, they still are. I still have the moments, the up and down moments and things like that. But what I found that works for me is that I I do things that my son and I used to do, right? I still go to the lake. Yeah, even though there's nobody around, I kind of prefer it that way from time to time because that's like my moment. Those are like my moments with him and things like that. And then as you both said, I I started living in the moment, right? When the grief was hard, I sat in the moment with the grief. And instead of looking at it in a negative way, I tend to look for the things, the messages that it was sending me. Like, maybe my son is trying to send me a message. Maybe my mother's trying to talk to me, or my father or my younger brother, trying to wish me happy holidays or something like that. And memories, memories would start to flood in that made me smile. So this year I focused more on the memories that made me smile than the moments that changed my life. And for me, that was the healthiest way that I can do. It wasn't about being around people, or it wasn't about it wasn't about it wasn't about anyone else, right? It was about honoring um, honoring the ones that have passed away and finding a reason to smile, but also finding a reason to tell those that are still around that I love them. So for me, that's the way that I do it. Anybody want to piggyback off of that?
Now, I think one of the greatest things is that we put on, I shouldn't say the greatest thing, one of the greatest obstacles, I think, in holidays is we put on a mask, right? Because we don't want to shake
Mm,
up the holidays for other people. And I learned, and Tony, we've talked about this before, is basically we are the biggest givers, right? Even though we're in the worst amount of pain, we somehow, for whatever reason, which is awesome, I think it's because we feel this intense pain. We want to help, we want to give, we want to support. And a lot of times we end up being the supporter of everyone else around us that are that we forget about ourselves, right? We forget about what we're
mm,
going through, what we're dealing with. And so in the holidays we put on that mask, we help everybody else out, we make sure everybody else is okay, and if they say something awkward, no, 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 don't worry about it, it's no big deal. When inside it's like, I'm going to remember that forever, because there's things that are said to us that we remember forever. But we learn patience, right? With grief, we learn how to be
yes.
more patient, more grateful, more accepting. And I think that's what helps us in those situations where we're in with our family and there is that awkwardness, that we leave on that grief mask that can sometimes um, not allow us to give our true feelings or our true emotions out. So we have to be really careful when we put on that grief mask. Um, we're protecting others, but then it's also excluding ourselves. So we have to be really careful when you're going into the holidays to say, this, I'm grieving. This is hurt. This is pain, right? And
Mm,
I can't take care of everybody else around me, right? And so that, I think, releases that guilt of the holidays where I was feeling like on Justin's birthday, because Justin passed away on November 17th, and then we had his funeral right before Thanksgiving. And then I had Christmas, and then I had his birthday in February. So what I was doing was that first year was I was like consoling everybody else. And then at the end of the day, I was angry with myself that I didn't allow myself to grieve or to feel, because I was taking care of everyone else's grief. And so we have to remove that mask and we have to allow ourselves to be comfortable in that emotion, just like you said, in that present time, in that feeling, to know that it's okay to let out those emotions and let people know. I'm not asking you to fix me. I'm not trying to get you to fix me and make everything better. I just want you to sit beside me and listen, right? That's what I need. I don't want you to take care of me. I don't want you to fix me. I don't want you to say anything. I just want you to let me have this moment, this present moment, um, of openness, right?
Right.
Yeah,
I have a
definitely.
question.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
go ahead,
completely
Lisa.
agree.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's interesting as we're talking about this. My son-in-law passed away from a fall in front of my daughter. So my daughter is alive, and you both lost your sons. And what I found in that moment of grief, and still do, but really at that moment in time, that first holiday, all of the first year, first 2 years, and even now, there's a part of my daughter that died that day that I will never get back. It's not a mom fix. You cannot fix it. But I also had this sideline grief. I don't know how to explain it other than that, where, like you were saying, Hope, I was trying to take care of and make sure everybody was eating, or, cleaned a kitchen for my daughter's, the in-laws. They had lost their son. I was carrying their grief and mine, but yet kind of felt like I couldn't really fully express my grief because he wasn't my biological son who passed away. It's just it was such a strange, and they're the most amazing humans ever. And they love my daughter like their own. But it was a very strange, trying to tiptoe around and try to figure that out. And I think maybe there might be somebody in the audience who kind of understands that. I know not to say stupid things, I hope, but I'm sure I probably did. But I tried to just be there, but a little bit on the sidelines. Like, I didn't want to get involved. I didn't want to step over a line, if that makes sense. But I was so grieving. So I'd get in the car, go home, and bawl my eyes out, talk to my best friend, and relieve it that way. So, Hope, you're right. We need to be able to release and take that mask off and just be authentic and be real and sit in that uncomfortable, be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
I like
And I
that.
think that's one of the things that we deal with just in human. I mean, we're human, right? We don't want to hurt somebody's feelings or say something awkward or try to make something worse out of the situation. And when we're in different types of grief, like I tell everybody, every type of grief that you experience is different. Your grief towards grandma, your grief toward your son, your grief toward your sibling, your grief toward your mother, all those griefs are completely different and unique. And so, in doing so, we just have to be authentic with those feelings, right? We have to be authentic and say, you know I'm not as close to your son. I don't know what you're feeling, right? I'll never know that feeling, right? What you're going through, because everybody's grief is different. Everybody feels different with their grief. And even though you can say, I get it, I understand grief, but I don't understand your grief, right? And that's just being authentic and saying, I've grieved, but I don't know what you're going through, right? I don't know what you're feeling and what your emotions are. And I think that takes off that, like, I'm just trying to band-aid this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And David Kessler said it so well. It's like, your grief is the worst grief because it's yours. It's
Right.
yours you're carrying.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that leads me to a question. And I got into a conversation with someone the other day, and we were discussing when people invite you over, right? That have experienced the same, the same loss, and this individual was feeling uncomfortable because it was a family member, it was a cousin, I think, that was like, hey, come on over, we're going to celebrate Thanksgiving. So they're picking up the traditions. So that's one question. What about traditions? Do you keep them going? How do you approach those? Or do you sometimes let them fall to the wayside because that loved one isn't there? And secondly, how do you honor your grief while respecting the people who had the relationship with the loved one who passed away during the holidays? Because what I told her was, this individual was like, hey, like, I don't know, I'm not feeling it. I said, well, if you're not feeling it, don't go, period. Just don't go. She goes, well, I want to go and be around my family and things like that. And I said, well, think about it this way. Everyone that you're going to be around is going to be grieving because of their relationship that they have with the individual. Now you can go and still be, still grieve that loved one, but also keep in mind that the people who are there with you are grieving that loved one from the relationship that they had. So, and Hope, you said it well. It depends on the relationship that you have with the individual. Every grief is different. The relationship that we have with our parents is going to be different from the ones that we have with our children, or a sibling or a friend and things like that. So how do you um, approach those situations? Like, you want to, but deep down inside, you're like, I don't know how everybody's going to be reacting. I know, because as someone who is grieving or has grieved to a very deep extent, we all understand, right? It is, we kind of don't think about the other people, right? In a lot of senses, right? You know, um, So how do you approach that situation? Are you, are you mindful of the people that are around you? Do you just say no? Or do you go out of respect and kind of hold space with everyone as well while they hold space with you? I think that's a mutual thing. And I think a lot of people, what I'm saying, going into this holiday season, maybe facing similar situations.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the thing is that we put so much pressure on ourselves out of guilt, perhaps. I mean, grief and
Mhm.
guilt go hand in hand. They're like a married couple. And even in the holiday season,
Mhm.
it's like it's heightened. So if you do decide to go, then always have an out. Leave early. If it's just not sitting right, let them know. It's like what Hope was saying. Talk to the host. Say, I'm gonna come, but I might not get out of the car in the driveway and go home, just so you know, or I might stay there until 10 o'clock at night. I mean, I don't really know. So let's see how it goes. So I think there's this expectation that if we go, we have to stay forever, and then we have to put this fake smile on and be okay and carry everyone's grief. So I think setting that expectation, and sometimes I think relieving a pressure and just saying it's okay to go, not this year, I ain't doing it, and then not carry the grief, or practice not carrying the grief in that way. And as far as different ritual traditions, I mean, in the UK they don't have Thanksgiving, so I don't have to balance that out. It's Christmas. Um, but we have different traditions. First year, we actually spent at Jack's family's house. It was hideously difficult, but we tried. The next year, I went to Jack's house we did it again. Then the third year, it was like, okay, we're going to do something different. But my daughter spent time with us and with his family. And so over the course of the years, we've just course corrected. We've just done different things, and whatever felt okay. And everybody understands that that's okay. So we're not carrying this massive amounts of guilt. My daughter Alexa, the one who lost her fiance, she is going to Australia for Christmas this year. So she's going to spend time with her best friend traveling. And we're all like, go. This is such a healing time for you. So I would say to people, do what you want and feel necessary, and don't carry the guilt of others nor yourself.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it's amazing. I think one of the things that I've learned is like when we're grieving, travel is easier than facing the family and that holiday traditions, because you're missing a piece of your heart, right? And so sometimes it's easy just to find an excuse not to do the holidays, right? But I think we need to start being honest with ourselves and not carrying that guilt of saying, I can't do this right now even though it's a tradition. um, let's start a new tradition. And that's what I tell everybody. If the traditions are what's bothering you, then ask them to start a new tradition that means something to you. If that's not in your wheelhouse, you're not comfortable with that, then say, listen, I'm going to sit this one out. It's just too much for me. It's too hard. Or can we start a new one? Can we do this? Can we do that? I think traditions bring back the memories, and it's the triggers that happens to us where
Mm.
it is easier for me to avoid the situation than deal with that trigger, that trigger and tradition. Is that a cop out? Absolutely. But sometimes in the holidays, we get to the point where the stress is so overwhelming that we end up being so frustrated, unhappy, guilted, that we cannot wait for the holidays to be over. And that's a lot of us, right? We get to the point where here comes November, here comes December. It sucks. I hate it. I want to get the heck over this, right? And that's not what traditions are about. That's not what holidays are about. And so we have to find that medium that says traditions, I'm going to start a new one. Instead of going to Aunt Carol's house let's go to somebody else's house. Let's do it at my house where if I need to run to the bathroom or my bedroom for 15 minutes to just release, I can do that. And traditions are traditions. And if you aren't able to handle those traditions today, this year, say no and be okay with that in your in your mind, in yourself, because I think the pressure, the stress on top of the grief can be overwhelming, right? And that's
Yeah.
not fair to you. It's not fair to your loved one. It's not fair to your family. And I think that's where we have to really set those expectations to say, I can't do this year, or I'm not able to do this, but I will try to do that. But I need you to be okay with that. I need you to be forgiving of that, or accepting, not forgiving, what just accept me for what I can do this year. And I think you make a great point, Tony, too. Like, oftentimes we forget when we're deep in our grief, others are grieving that same loss that we are. I'm like, you don't know what I'm going through. You didn't lose your son. But in reality, they are grieving. My son lost his brother. My nieces lost their uncle. My mother lost her grandson. And we forget, I'll be honest, I am probably the harshest when it comes to um, allowing other people's grief to be equal to mine. And I think it's because mine feels like, okay, that's your brother. It's not your son. It's your grandson. It's not your son. And I think that's another point where with holidays, they're missing that person at that table too. So I
Right.
think we have to be completely understanding of that as well. Like, I think we have to be very, very careful what we say as grievers and as around other people that are grieving the same loss that you are.
Right. Yeah, that's good. That's another episode that we got coming up. Because and it's what I'm saying, because it's called the selfishness of grief, right? You know what I'm saying? So, and the reason why, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because um, it goes to the question of understanding your triggers during the holiday as well, because the first holidays, you don't know what's going to trigger you, right? We have no idea, so everything is new, right? And someone said something to me, and I had to take a step back because I couldn't believe that they had said it, but I understood where they were coming from, and then I politely corrected them. They said, "Well, we already got the first year down and out the way, so you know what I'm saying, I think we're going to be okay." Because I lost my best friend, and I watched this whole family get wiped out by COVID 2 years ago. And so his daughters, I was telling his daughters, "Hey, if you need someone to talk to, let me know. I can connect you with one of my colleagues and everything." And that was the comment that they gave me. So now I'm watching as they're starting to realize that, hey, the first year was hard. Yes, you know what I'm saying. The second year still hard. The third year and fourth, those are going to be the ones that get you, because you're just now figuring out your triggers and everything else that come along with this, especially during the holidays, birthdays, and things like that, right? So understanding, and I want to make this known to the listeners, your triggers will change. Soon as you think that you have them, you know what I'm saying, known, you may have them down like the back of your hand, but then all of a sudden they're going to change. They're going to show up in a different way. And so you have to be mindful of this, of yourself during that time, and be be willing to learn that new trigger so you become more aware, because it's been 7 years for my son, 5 years for my mother, and I tell you, there are still times where my grief surprises me. I this holiday, you know what I did? I worked. I came into the office. I sat in front of the computer. I started getting everything taken care of, getting podcasts, talking to people and things like that, making sure everybody was okay. Because I was in a, I mean, Thanksgiving, I was in a good space. I was happy. I was feeling okay. And then, later on that night, I was just like, man, I was sitting around and talking to the girlfriend, and I just got quiet. I just got really, really quiet. And she goes, "What's wrong?" I said, "I don't know." And I want people to understand it's okay. It's so, I wasn't anxious, but I think I was kind of depressed. I was in that depressive mode where I was remembering the first Thanksgiving with my loved ones and things like that. And that goes back, from when I was a child up until I was an adult, when I was a father. And so those many, many things that came along with it, it surprised me. There came another trigger that I wasn't aware of. And grief is my mentor. It's consistently teaching me things, right?
Yeah.
But how does one, when we're wrapped into our grief during the holidays, how does one become aware of their own triggers?
It's funny that you said that first year, we don't even know what our triggers is. It's almost like everything's a trigger, right? Like everything.
Right,
Like
right,
you're going through so much, like everything triggers you. And then the second year, it's like, okay, that first year, everything did. This year, you get to start to know those triggers. And I think
right.
that's when it happens is when we start to recognize those triggers and how to handle those triggers. Like for me, one of the biggest triggers I dealt with Justin was every time I saw somebody walking outside, and I literally could not understand because Justin never walked anywhere. He was 19. That kid got rides everywhere or drove himself. So I was like, why is this triggering? So sometimes we don't even know why the triggers are happening, and why it exists. And so, just like you said, I don't know why I'm upset. I don't know why this is triggering me. I'm eating stuffing and it's triggering me. I don't know why. And I think those kind of things, when they happen, we have to be in the moment. We have to acknowledge it, right? And say, just like you, I don't know. If you don't know, you don't know. But for me, one of the things was I had to change the mindset of that trigger. So it's
Mhm.
not so intimidating for me. So when I would see people out walking, it would just break me down. And I would be like, he's out here alone. And, cause I couldn't say goodbye. And so it was just so emotional for me. And then it got to the point where I knew I had to change something about that trigger. And so I started changing my mindset. And that's when it became was every time I saw somebody walking, that was Justin walking beside me in my life. And that gave me a good feeling. That meant you're here. I feel you. I see you. And I, for whatever reason, see people walking in the weirdest times. Like when I'm going to the gym, it's dark out and I'll see somebody walking. I'm like, why is that person walking? And I think to myself, that's just a constant reminder. He's right here with me. And so
Mhm.
I think acknowledging the trigger, feeling the trigger, and if you don't know why it's triggering, just understand sometimes there isn't a reason, there isn't an answer. But also, if it's something that's reoccurring triggers, try to change your mindset about them. Just like for me, it was, I had to make a conscious effort to say, what can I do to change the mindset of this person, this trigger? And that's one of the things that I did completely is say, I need to put a spin on this. I need to feel this different. And it has been amazing because now I'm like, oh, I see you, I got you. I see
I
that
love
person
it.
walking, and it's right. It's completely different. So that's one of the greatest things that's come out is change your mindset about triggers when you see them continuously.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Lisa,
It's
you want
so
to
it's
piggyback
so
off that?
true. Yeah, and the thing with this is we want to put things in a formula. This is what we humans want, right? Everything needs to make
Mhm.
sense. Put a little box, put a little ribbon on it, and it's all makes sense. And this doesn't make sense. It's outside of a box. There is no formula. But we go, oh, after the first anniversary, well, actually, the second, third, fourth, 10th, 30th, 50th is just another reminder that it's been that long since you've talked to them, held them, cried with them, heard their laughter, hugged them. There's a void, right? And that is the reality. But we want to go, after year one, like all is going to be so much better. And then after year one, it's not. Then they're like, what is wrong with me? So this is a part of the grief the illiteracy that we have, and we need to educate people on grief. And that's why it's so important. And I mean, I love what you said, Hope, because it's exactly right. When these things happen and we all these emotions are starting to happen, we need to just acknowledge it and maybe not have a formula for it. Maybe there is absolutely no reason for it. Signs and synchronicities, some people believe in it, some people don't. I had no knowledge of it because I hadn't lost anybody until my dad passed, and then my niece, and then my mom, and then my son-in-law. And I see things all over. And it's like, yep, they're here. This is amazing. As soon as I start thinking of Jack, a bunch of birds fly in a J. And I'm like, well, that can't be a coincidence. So there's these things where, like you talk about, Hope, about reframing this trauma that I see and I see and I see. I moved, my husband at the time split, and I moved into a little apartment just outside of Chester, which is in the north of England. There's a funeral home right across the street. And in this town, it's literally like the streets are this small and it's like a little building. And that, I found out, was the funeral home that we used for Jack. And I was like, seriously, dude, like, are you kidding me? Because he was quite a funny guy. I'm like, that's not funny, right? Like, so luckily I had a bereavement counselor, and I was like, oh my God, like I knew that it was there, and I knew I'd have to deal with seeing these hearses and coffins and it was very triggering for me. It's just like, why didn't you name them? Like, let's put, like, Gladys, she's doing her job because she's carrying this person. And I always put 80-year-old, 90-year-old, 120-year-old woman who's lived a great life. Like, I make a story up. Mm-hmm. And then we got Gene or whoever, he's carrying the family. And like, for me, it was such an amazing thing to reframe and change that whole story. Instead of being triggered every time. I mean, it wasn't fun. I didn't enjoy it. I never liked it, but it helped me heal. And I was like, hey, Jack, like, hey, right? And that's when I saw the J birds, and it was crazy. So signs and synchronicities for me are almost more stronger now than triggers. Mm-hmm. And that's the positive flip of going, for me, I cannot deny what I'm seeing here. Right. So anybody who believes that and understands that that'll resonate with them.
Nice. I definitely like that. You guys touched on some really good points. One of the things that actually helped me change my mind about a lot of stuff, especially when it came to my son. I remember the fourth year, I was out and I was driving around, and I said, you know what, I'm going to stop over here at this Hobby Lobby, and I'm going to grab me some canvases and some paint, and I'm going to do some artwork. That's just how my grief showed up, and I wanted to see what it looked like just from a grieving standpoint. And so I go into now. I never end up getting the stuff. And it's funny how it happened, because what happened was a trigger, but as you both said, it was a mindset change as well. So I'm in the store and I'm walking through the aisles, and I see this little kid running through. And for the longest time, I avoided kids, because it was just too painful. And I'm watching this little guy run up and down the aisles. He's just having a blast. He got himself some toys and everything. He's doing kid stuff. And something inside of me just started laughing. And I laughed out loud. And so my curious mind, I said, you know what? I'm gonna go see what this kid is doing. It looks like he's having a blast. Now here's the trigger. I go to where the kid is. The kid looks identical to my son. Identical. And so when I see him, I go, I had to stop because I was thinking to myself, did somebody take my son? And this is him right there, right? You know.
Mm-hmm.
But I held back and I almost started crying. I almost broke down in the store. But instead I will go over to the kid and I see him playing. I said, what are you playing? He goes, well, I have this little car, you know, and I'm letting it go down the street or down the aisle, and I'm chasing it, you know, and I have my dinosaur and I'm pretending that the dinosaur is getting the car. And I stopped and I'm just like, oh my God, characteristics almost identical. And I'm smiling, I'm laughing, and I asked him if I could play with him. So now me and the kid is in the aisle, and he has the dinosaur, and I have the car because, of course, he wants to eat the car. And so now he's chased me with the car and everything. And I tell the kid, I said, thank you very much. And he said something that caught me off guard, something that my son said to me before he passed away. He said, sometimes it's okay to stop and smell the flowers. Exact words that my son said to me before he passed away. And I turned around and I looked at him. I said, thank you very much, young man. And I turned around when he got in my car and I sat in the car for 30 minutes and just bawled my eyes out. And that's a strange world for me. And, you know, and for most men as well, you know, to allow ourselves to be emotional in those moments and things like that. But it wasn't a sad cry. It was a relief cry, you know. And just like you said, Lisa, it was that moment where I realized that he was still there with me. And so I began to, like you said, search out certain things and things like that. And I know people out there right now that may be going through something similar. Don't walk away from those opportunities. This is how our loved ones, you know, what I believe, how our loved ones communicate to us when they know that they need us the most, or they know that we need them the most, right? But they can't communicate to us like face to face. And I think a lot of times we get wrapped up into trying to busy ourselves, that we don't listen to what's going on inside of our minds and in our hearts, because we are trying to busy ourselves.
Yeah, and you can't make that up. You can't make up that. That just what he said to you, this little kid you've never met. Like these are things that evidence shows that like that is not a made up thing. Who would have ever said that? A child with who would ever? Never.
Yeah,
I've never heard a young child say something like that. It's amazing. What a
it
gift.
was, yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy because it reminded me of the conversations that I had with my son. Um, Now here's another incident where I decided to get out and walk one day. Walk down to the lake, and I'm walking around the lake. It's a lake that me and my son used to fish all the time. And as I'm walking, I see this lady. She's walking around. She has a cane, and she's getting after it with her cane. You know, she's just doing her thing. And she lapped me probably about 2 times, made me feel like an old man. Oh yeah, she was getting after it now, you know. And I couldn't do anything. I was like, you know, I'm just strolling along. And she was like, and as she's lapping me the second time, she said something to me that my mother used to always say to me when I was a kid. She said, baby boy, she goes, you're only as old as you feel. And it's something so simple that we hear all the time. And I looked at her. She did her head like this. She smiled. She goes, "I'll see you again." And she went on about her way. And there's a little spot where I used to always sit at where I fished at and everything. And I went and I went and sat down in that little spot. And I just sat there for a minute. And I just thought to myself, "Mom, I know that was you."
Yeah.
And I didn't move from that spot for probably a good 3 or 4 hours. Now the only thing that was missing was my fishing pole. That was it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I was missing my fishing pole. And I was like, here I am at the lake. The lake is nice and calm. Well, I'm just going to sit with this for a minute. And it took me back to a childhood memory. And
amazing.
that too was like, wow, but I guess in the beginning stages, I didn't look at those things or really paid attention to them. I was again wrapped into my own pain. And for those that are out there, it's okay to get lost in your pain. Your pain doesn't have to be a negative thing. It's honestly, it's the consequence of love. If you love someone, when they're gone, you're going to experience a certain amount of pain that comes along with that. So that's something, one of the expectations I want people to not have when it comes down to that. It is the consequence of love. And the only way to avoid it is to not let yourself do it.
Right. I think it's awesome that before you never really realize that, because there's a mystery to death, right? There's a mystery to grieving and where our loved ones are. And so if we haven't experienced that, you don't stop to notice things that you would have maybe seen before, like, certain signs, certain situations, certain people. And then after you lose somebody so close to you, you start to hold on to those, because that mystery, that question of, are they okay? Where are they? Are they here? Are they with me? And it's really, of course, what you believe religiously, figuratively, whatever you believe. But mine was always, I was so worried about if he was okay, right? Like if he, was feeling pain, was he feeling, any kind of remorse or emotions? Did he know how much I loved him? Did he know how much? And so when we see these signs, they reinforce that to us, that we've never, and it's again what we believe. But for me, it acknowledges he's okay. He knows that I miss him. I love him. I need these points in my life that keep me strong, that give me the courage to keep honoring and keep running and making the most of my life. Because I think without these signs, I would probably question so much. But if as I receive these signs, and mine are sometimes the craziest things ever. We were at his graveyard for his anniversary just 2 Fridays ago, or Friday ago, and this rooster, it's just the craziest things. But this rooster kept making rooster sounds. I'm not going to do it on live, but and then he came over to the grave. And I was like, okay, listen, and I'm like, really, Justin? So then I'm using it to my advantage. I'm like, if you know I'm here, or if you know how much I love you, or you want to tell me you love me, make that rooster crow, right? So then I'm trying to use it to my advantage. And it was 5 minutes of dead silence. That rooster did nothing. And I was like, are you serious? And then I start questioning my own sanity, of course. And I said those words to myself, right? And so as soon as I spoke them out loud to my husband, I said, I just asked Justin to make that rooster crow. And he just like, what? And as soon as I said that, that damn rooster crowed. And so I was like, okay, we can leave. I've got mission accomplished. But just those signs we have to take advantage of, right? Like, Okay, I got you. You're here. You're with me. I can, keep moving forward. And I think sometimes those are just so needed at a particular moment, right? And I think that's what the greatest thing is, if that's something that you really truly believe. But I hold on to those, and I love it. I love every bit of it. And I was not going to leave that graveyard till that rooster crowed. It could have been days, but I was going to stay there.
I love that, because questioning our sanity, especially during the holidays, right? Like you see certain things and you're like, you know what? If that's you, make yourself known. Do this, right? And then, like you said, they don't do anything, and so then you sit there like yourself, like I'm actually talking to an
Right.
animal or an inanimate object or something like that, right? Um, and then when it happens, you're like, okay, I'm done. I'm over it right now. I'm not doing this. I'm just not going to
Mm,
do it, right? You know, and I think that's important for people to understand. These things do happen, right? And it's okay to have a good laugh, and everything. And the reason why I say that, and it's something that we've all been talking about, but not really mentioned, the stigma behind the grieving, during the holidays. There's such a negative stigma about it, that, we associate sadness and anger and solitude, because we think or we believe, and I think Lisa, you hit on it perfectly. We think that there's a guideline that we have to follow, during these times. And just like each and every last one of us has said, there is no guidelines to this. There's no blueprint. There's definitely no blueprint. So let the stigma go out the window and be open. Um, be open to yourself, right? Be okay to give yourself permission, to just go with your grief. And the reason why I say that, and if I'm wrong, please let me know if I'm wrong. And if you want to piggyback off of it, when you allow yourself to go with your grief will take you places that will amaze you, right? It will tap into something inside of you, that makes you more human, right? That makes you a little bit more empathetic, makes you a little bit more compassionate, you know, that helps you be a little bit more understanding in that moment of your surroundings
that's
and
beautiful.
what's
That gave
going
me
on.
chills. Yeah. That gave me chills because let me tell you, it provides, I think grief has given me strength that I did not know even existed.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that's exactly what you said, Tony. Like, I have so much power and conviction and strength and courage that I did not know existed inside myself. And I'll tell you, one of the things that you mentioned as well is laughter during the holidays. People think it's terrible. Like, oh, I'm laughing. I shouldn't be laughing. I'm grieving.
yeah,
Or I
yeah.
shouldn't be having a good time. I'm grieving. And that's one of the things with holidays is that it's usually a joyous, happy, laughy time. And we find so much guilt within ourselves that we shouldn't be doing that. And so I think it's amazing that you brought that up. And one of the things that I tell people all the time is that when you're laughing, joking, and having a good time, that is especially what they want from you. They do
Mhm.
not want you to live in sadness and guilt and grief and heaviness and darkness. And I get it, we're there, but it's finding that light that comes from them as well. Finding that light to out of this darkness, to laugh, to have a good time, to keep living. That's what I want people to understand with grief. It's a not finish line approach, right? Like, I kept thinking there was going to be a finish line to this. Like, if I did everything that everybody said, I saw on TV, I did what the counselors did, there would be a finish line and I could cross it and I
Mhm.
could be done with this grief, right? And so I kept searching for that finish line and thinking, as soon as I'm done, I can go back to that life that I lived. And then I realized that the finish line keeps moving. It never ends. But
Right.
my life doesn't either. And so I have to keep pushing myself forward to keep being the better person, to keep being the best of what I need in honor of them. And some days there's sadness, some days there's happiness, some days there's courage and strength. But every single day is a day that we're given to live in honor of them. And so that's what I live for each and every day. They don't have that choice, but I do now. I have that choice to live for them and for me. And so that's where the happiness is found. That's where the light starts to peek through all the darkness. And I tell people that darkness is still there. It doesn't go away. There's no finish line, but there is a way to win the race every single day. And it's just amount of courage and strength and honor that you put towards it.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, honoring those. I feel like I always hear my parents like, Lisa, don't be crying for, like, get on with it, and cheering me on as they always did in every sporting event and anything I ever did, cheering me on. But then what I love is the saying that we can fully grieve and fully live at the same time. And that to me was so powerful. It's what you were saying, Hope. We can fully live and we can fully grieve. Like, you don't have to have one or the other. And for me, one of my core values is humor. It's something that I was raised and we had a lot of laughter. And so I was almost seeking out something, a TV show, anything to just lighten the load a bit. And then when you could really belly laugh, I didn't have the guilt of that because I did have a knowledge that actually I'm fully living and fully grieving. And it's okay to laugh. It's okay to belly laugh. It's okay to be happy. It's okay to have those moments. Even in the early stages, that acute grief, we still had funny stories about Jack, all of his friends and all of them, they all grew up together having these stories I'd never heard. And I was like, Jack, what did you do? And we would laugh and laugh and laugh. And I thought, this is what he would want to be known for. This is what he would want his friends to be doing, is laughing at all this stupidity and stupid things he did. And that to me was like you were saying, Hope, it's honoring that person's life, not the death, the life that they had, no matter how short or long it was.
Now, it leads me to my next question, right? Those who have been stuck around the holidays in their grief, right? Because it's easy to get stuck. It is definitely, I think at one point in time, we all was there, right? Especially during the holidays, because it's a circle. It's a circle, you watch, rinse, and repeat until you can step outside of it and actually start to come to a place of acceptance, right? But before that time, that stuckness, the holidays come around, you're just like, ugh. I know for me, there was this one song that used to always come up, that used to always push me back into that circle. And it was 7 Years Old by I can't remember the artist's name, but if you know the song, right? So I was, after my son passed away, my first Christmas without him. I just remember driving around. This before I moved out to South Dakota. I was driving around. This song comes across the radio, and I'm wanting to sing it, right? Because now I'm looking in my mirror in my back seat. Now, that's what my son used to sit right on the right hand side of me. But what I did, I put his monkey, his stuffed animal monkey, into the seat. And what I'm saying? I almost forgot that it was there. So now this song is on. I look up and I'm looking in the mirror and I see the monkey. and I literally had to pull over. I am falling apart like nobody's business. Nobody's business. And it took me back to the moment where everything changed. And I couldn't get out of it. And it felt like forever. It took me, probably 2, 3 months. And I had to take the monkey out the car. And I just remember I was so angry. I took the monkey and just threw it in the closet. Just like, I'm done with you, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember just every day from that moment, I was stuck. I couldn't get out of that rut. Everything that I did, it just seemed like I couldn't do no right in this world, and it took me to a really, really dark place, So, what would you suggest for people that are stuck in that moment around the holidays? Because I know what I did, after a while, it was getting up in the mornings, writing down something that I was grateful for. It was saying a prayer for the people that I worked with. God, just keep them safe today. It was saying something for myself. Forgive me for what I didn't know. Teach me how to move with this so I can get out of this circle that I'm in. Because I realized that it was a circle, right? I realized that it was a very, very harsh circle. But it took that, and it took putting in some work to get outside of that and looking at it and going, no longer do you get to have that control over my heart, you
Mm.
know. And I think and that was for me, right? And maybe you guys have some suggestions for the audience out there, that's going to be listening to it. What would you suggest for those who are stuck, right, and get stuck?
So one of the things is that I talk about with Grief to Hope is finding that inspiration to get you out of bed. And sometimes it's small, sometimes it's big, sometimes it's long-term goal, sometimes it's short-term goal. But having a focus is what's super important. And for me, what I did was I literally had to accomplish things to start to gain the strength and courage that I needed. And once you start accomplishing things, and it could be a week, write something down you want to get done at the end of the week or the next day. Preferably, the next day is something that you can literally check off your to-do list. For example, if you want to go through your son's things in his closet or in his room, put it down on paper, write it down, and you want to accomplish it. That next morning, that puts your focus onto what you want to accomplish. And then it can be big or small, it could be large, it could be huge, it could be I want to write a book, I want to blog something, I want to start a podcast. It can also be a long-term goal, but those minor small goals that you accomplish will start to build your strength and your accomplishments. Because one of the things that I did was I quit smoking, which was like, people are like, are you kidding me? You just lost Justin 6 months ago. You're going to pick now to quit smoking? And I was like, I felt if I could quit smoking, I could accomplish anything, right?
Mm,
And
yes.
so it was the mindset, the focus that I needed to continue to do and say, I am strong enough. If I can get through the worst ungodly pain that I've ever been in my whole life, which is grief, smoking is nothing. Yeah, and so that's when I started to build that strength of finding a focus, finding that to hope is what I call What is your next step? What is your next move? And that in the back of your mind creates that accomplishment, that strength, that energy that you are literally, it's just like going into the gym. We never smile when we go into the gym, but we smile our asses off when we walk out that gym, right? Because we got its accomplishment, it's finished, feeling good, right? Like that's what I
Yeah,
tell people all the
yeah,
time. Like I'm not in the, I don't look, happy when I'm going in the gym, but I sure as hell I'm like, I accomplished something and I'm happy as I'm walking out of the gym. And that's what doing those things are. So write things down that you want to accomplish, big, small, whatever. Make a chart, make it beautiful, put it on a whiteboard. I don't care how you do it. But as you check those things off, you will start to feel that strength, that energy, that drive. And it can be an honoring of your loved one, which, like I love Lisa said, they're our number one cheerleader up there, right? Like they are cheering us
hmm
on. So that if that's your why, use that when your will doesn't get you out of bed, get your why to get you out of bed, right? That's what matters.
Mhm. Yeah, I love
I love
that. I
that.
mean, it's so interesting how just connected this whole conversation is because as Hope is talking, I was thinking, well, the one thing that I said to my daughter, because when someone passes away, there's so much. You have a funeral and you have this and you have the bills and you have all the laptop and we had to clean out the apartment they lived in, which was 2 hours away. There was all these things and it was around Christmas. And
hmm
I said, and I don't know where it came from, but I said, just do one thing a day, Alexa, just do one thing. And then when you do that one thing, just watch, shit on TV. Like, don't just one thing. So one day she goes, I go, so what was your one thing today? And she goes, I treated myself to a shower and shaved my legs. And I was like, that's two things. You're done now for the day. And actually that was so helpful. And so I tell people that exact same thing, like just do, even if it's just one thing. The other thing that just for me was a lifeline is supportive loved ones, friends. It was like my best friend um, that just had space for me. Just she did everything just right. She just cried with me, even though we were 4,000 miles away. She just was there. Um, and physically there when I went back to Seattle to bury my parents. But to have a healthy support network around you and set the toxic ones or the people who are no longer serving you, maybe you have to just shelf them for a while. Maybe you have to just shelf them, then burn the shelf and get rid of the toxicity. But for me, that I would say for anyone, because when we feel stuck in any area of our life, it's like a screaming, it's just screaming, you need to move. Like just move, just do something. It is just saying you need to do something. And that's your body, your mind, everything screaming at you. And if that's calling your best friend or somebody, your partner, having that support system for me was, I mean, that was invaluable.
I love that. I definitely love that because it reminds me, right? It definitely reminded me of the why that I developed now versus the why that I developed then. My why back then, like you said, Hope, going to the gym, right? Now coming from a former bodybuilder, when my son passed away, I use that hurt and that anger in the gym. And then like you said, I came up with a goal. Now, whether or not it was a healthy goal or not, saying that's to be determined. I didn't reach it, but
Right.
I said, you know what? I'm 6'4". Right now, I'm 285. I'm gonna set a goal to 300 pounds. And that's what I did. And I was like, now as crazy as it may sound, that's what kept me going. I was like, you know what? the next time I get on stage, I'm going to compete at 300. I'm a big 300 pounds. Um, I reached it. I actually pressed way past it. I got up to 313. And I said, before I get up on stage, this is my goal. I want to be benching over close to 600 pounds. I got up to 585. Now that's dangerous, right? I don't recommend it for people, right? That's the way my mentality was. I was like, I'm gonna push myself, because I think deep down inside what I was doing is that I was trying to see if I could hurt myself more than what I was hurting. But having those goals and everything, I didn't understand how beneficial it was. So the lesson was inside of the malicious intent towards myself, right?
Right.
But they were small goals. They were little goals nonetheless, right? And I reached them. And when I got to that point, I said, well, I'm here now. What's the next goal for me? Like, what's the next thing? And in my mind, I was like, I'm gonna start a personal training company. I think I'm gonna do that, right? And lo and behold, those choices came back on me. It was like, oh yeah, you thought we're gonna have to face some things first, Tony, because this is not healthy, right? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So my body said, hey, you better drop some weight. So I did. I ended up dropping back down to 285, and then when I saw the doctor said, you need to go down a little bit more. So I was like, but I feel good. He goes, yeah, but we're gonna have to talk about this, Tony. You know what I'm saying? Like, you gotta drop some more weight. I said, well, how much weight do I need to drop? He goes, well, you at 285 right now. He goes, I would like to see you around 220, 200 if you can. Oh yeah, so it was a complete drop. So now I'm down to 202. Yeah, yeah. So, and I did that in less than 8 months. So it was like, oh, well, I'm not trying. I like the way I look. I like the way I feel. It was like, yeah, you might like the way you feel, but your heart don't.
Right.
So it was like
my mommy says that all the time, by the way. Right?
Yeah, but now, I go into the gym and people are looking like, Tony, what happened? I go, the doctor made me do it. So I pout now, you know what I'm saying? So instead of having that anger and things like that, I pout because everybody's like, dude, we remember you. I was like, I know. So that's my way. That I guess that is my way of making light of the situation and everything. And I still enjoy the gym. I'm probably one of the few people that when you mention gym, I get excited. I get excited.
You are one of the few.
I love. Yeah, I love working out. Right? You know what I'm saying? I love working out. I love going in there. And I look at everything, right? And I go, you know what? I'm gonna grab the 100-pound dumbbells over here. I'm gonna put about 300 pounds on the bench press over here. I'm gonna put about 1,400 pounds on the leg press, and then I create a circuit. And I would do that for 6 hours straight. And people would look at me, and I'll get up and I'll look at everybody, put all the weights back up, and I'll walk out the gym like, that was child's play.
That was yeah. I would not survive that.
Yeah, hoping I don't understand that. Yeah, but what's interesting is after my mom and dad passed away, my daughter Alexa and I joined a kickboxing class.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so good because everybody had their own pads, right? So you had someone spar. You could just the anger. And I think I remember saying something to Alexa. This was before Jack passed away. And I said something to Alexa about something that I knew would piss her right off. And she kicked these pads so hard that I think my teeth jiggled.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, whoa, I need to be careful. I was like, whoa, I think I touched a nerve there. But honestly, I think you have a really good point in the sense of doing these things like punching, depends on obviously in a controlled environment,
right.
but getting this energy out, getting this out of you when you feel stuck, when you don't, like Hope and I aren't excited to go to the gym, but finding that something, maybe swimming, maybe anything that would just increase, actually decrease your cortisol level, your stress hormone, right? We want to increase your endorphins, but we want to decrease the trauma. We want to decrease that stress hormone. And that for me, even though I was like cursing and cussing at the trainer, at the end, like you said, you leave, like you said, Hope, you leave and go, look what I just did.
Yeah. It's awesome.
See, and that just goes along what we've all been talking about, the movement of grief, right? You know what I'm saying? How important it is um, to not let grief sit in your body, and things like that. If you pay attention to your body, like we all go to the gym, right? But instinctively, and this is just me. Instinctively, my body is saying, hey, you need to move. You need to move this grief through your body. Don't let it sit here because it's going to cause complications
Yeah.
and things like that. And around the holidays, it's so easy for people to get caught up in a grief, right? You know what I'm saying? And want to lounge around and that's fine too. Trust me, that's fine. If you don't want to do anything, don't, but eventually you pay attention to your body. Your body says, hey, move. We need to move this through us, because if not, it can cause the physical problems, the sickness, and you know what I'm saying, and things like that. And you may go to the doctor and they may say, I don't know what's wrong with you. I can't
Right.
figure it out. And it can be that one little gesture of throwing on some music and dancing by yourself in the kitchen or in the living room. It can be, as you said, going to the gym, and you may not have to work out the way that I do, but getting on, just going through and walking around and connecting with other people. Now that's another way as well, during the holidays, connection in your community. Maybe go to the gym with someone that you know. Maybe go to the gym and meet other people, and you may be surprised of what you build from there, right? Standing, like you said, you got to be okay with being uncomfortable. And I think that's, if you look at it in a different perspective, getting outside that comfort zone and saying, hey, I just want to be around people right now. That is hugely important. It's hugely important, building a community around your grief, so others, so you can be supported properly from people, from individuals, but also learn how to develop some tools. Maybe have some resources. I know one of the things that I encourage the guys that I sit with, in the group, I tell them, exchange numbers with someone. Maybe someone you don't know, right? But exchange numbers with them. And the reason being, right? Because you have something in common. You're both in the group. You're both looking for support, but you guys haven't reached out yet to each other to give that support. So exchanging their numbers with someone that they don't know, you know what I'm saying? I just don't put it out there and just pass it around. Wherever that stops, that's the person that has your number, and whatever number that you have. Now, when you leave here, text that individual and introduce yourself. Right?
Love it.
Introduce yourself. And the reason why I say do that is because now you've expanded your network, and you're connecting with someone with the similar with something similar, or maybe not similar, but you guys are going through the same thing. And as men, right, you know what I'm saying, you have to understand, this is how we connect with each other. Basketball, sports, you know what I'm saying, sports, UFC fights and things like that. But also it takes you outside of your comfort zone, because two things you have to understand: if you're in my group, you've already put yourself in a vulnerable situation. The second thing is, if you're in my group, you can no longer judge one another. So you have those two things in common. So now time to build around that, and then be that person that if you're going through something, you can pick up the phone and call. Hey
Love
man,
it.
how you doing? I need somebody to talk to. Can you be available? Yeah, I can be. Okay. So that's the reason why I do that. It's a tactic that I learned, and it works wonders with people, especially during the holidays, because this is when it gets the heaviest. Especially speaking from a male's point of view, this is when where our anger flares up the most because we miss, right? And understanding how we as men express ourselves, you know, during the holidays is through our anger because that's what we are used to. That is our go-to, right? You know what I'm saying? Because we're not taught how to express our emotions. You got to remember that, right? So when it comes down to it, we're like, we're ready to go punch something. We're ready to go, cut somebody out. Family members, things like that. The person who's closest to us, the ones that we hurt the most, right?
Right.
But also tell the family members, I go, what you're seeing right now is a perception of what you think it is, but it's not. And I asked them a simple question: have you ever seen your significant other, your brother, your uncle, or anybody like that cry? They go, no. I said, look at what they're doing. Or they're just angry. That's what he's doing. He's crying.
Yeah.
It's the perception. So during the holidays, when you see your male counterpart, your brother or your uncle, your cousin, or anything like that, walking around angry, wanting to seclude themselves, understanding what you're seeing. This is how we express ourselves. This is how we cry.
Yeah, that's great.
So, anybody want to piggyback off of that?
No, I think it's true. I think there are so many men and women different expectations of grief, and we've talked about this, Tony, before. Is that I think the expectations for women is you can grieve what I would say like a longer approved grief time than a man has approved grief time. What I mean by that is we have some like people literally provide a limit for you. Like they think you have a certain amount of time to grieve, and women have that longer period where men aren't allowed or permitted to have that longer term of grief. Ironically enough, I think there's so many different biases with everything when it comes to men and women with grief, and that men are supposed to be, especially spouse wise, like, okay, listen, pick up the pieces, go run. But women are more gifted with compassion. Can I help you do your taxes? Can I change your oil? Can I get the filter? Those kind of things where a man doesn't have that opportunity. And maybe it is in certain circumstances, but cooking lasts a little bit longer with men, I think. Like he's getting casseroles longer, but that's about where it ends, right? So I think that's all the biases that we have with men, that they're not to grieve as long as women, no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what the grief is, no matter who it is. And I think that's something that desperately needs fixed. But I do agree with like finding that support person, finding that connection. And if you cannot find anyone to connect with, know that there's people like us on this call that is here, and there's so many resources that you can reach out that are absolutely non-cost or minimal amount to find that support. And that is where podcasting and these great talks and meetups, as well as support groups, it doesn't have to be mine. It could be any that you run into. There's a ton of resources out there. It just may take a lot of researching to find the right one for you, but they're out there.
Yeah. I don't think we're just not meant to do this life alone, in grief or outside of grief. We're meant to be in community. That's our human nature. So we're not meant to do this, even though grief is lonely. You don't have to do it alone. Like you said, Hope, there's there's resources, there's support, there's people who have been there and are there, who may be a little bit further down the road, who can look back and kind of help you up. You don't have to stay there. There are people who desperately want to help in that, and in a healthy way.
Yes. Wow. Wow. we're gonna wrap it up and everything. So, ladies, thank you so much for joining the panel today and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with the audience. Such a great conversation around such a tricky topic, right? And so I first and foremost, thank you both for being here. And I want to take some time and you guys tell people where they can find you and what you got coming up next.
Awesome. So you can find me at hopesupport.com. That's my website. We are going to we're having a final meeting this Thursday coming up in the 7-week session, but we'll be back again in January. So if you're interested, there's no cost to our support program. It's 7 weeks. You can come, go as you please. It's very, we're not judgmental. We're an open, family, safe space for you to be, and we'd love for you to join us. So Grief to Hope program starts back up in January. You can reach me at Hope Rieger, Facebook, Instagram, Grief to Hope, as well as LinkedIn. And of course, you can email me straight through my website. So easy to get a hold of me if you just want to reach out, chat. I will be doing some To Hope sessions coming up in 2024. That's going to be new. So reach out.
Nice. Lisa, I can be
Yeah. So Holistic Life Coaching with Lisa Marie Facebook page. And then I have at holistic_coach_Lisa on Instagram. And I can be found on LinkedIn as well. But my website is holisticlifecoaching.org.uk. And I'm in the UK. I do one-to-one grief coaching, and I also do grief educating. So right now I'm doing, between now and Christmas, a 1-hour session to help build resilience over the holidays. I also am going into corporations and organizations here in the UK and training and educating managers, directors, HR managers, CEOs, people who are overlooking other people. Because when someone passes away, they come back, 5 days they get off? Or, how can you support and direct the person and, create a safe environment in the workplace as well? So, so I can be reached on social media. And Tony, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, most definitely, man. You guys were amazing, man. Hope, Lisa, man. You guys are amazing always, man. And we got many more coming. And as always, I am Tony Lynch. I'm the host of this amazing podcast, the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. And here with my colleagues, and we have another one coming up. So if you missed this one this morning, go and check it out on YouTube. It'll be up. This will be up and running as soon as we get off. So go back and check it out. Listen to the conversation. Take down notes. There's a lot of amazing tools that you guys can put together, especially during the holidays. But also, if you guys want to tune in for the one later on this afternoon, we start at 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. That will also be live. It'll be another panel discussion. Stay tuned for December 2nd. We do have another one coming. It's going to be the selfishness of grief. And that's going to be at 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. on the 2nd Mountain Time. So you guys tune in for that. And also to my partners out there at IDLM. Thank you guys for everything. And looking forward to the next round of what we got coming up. So for you guys out there, you guys, thank you for your support. Thank you for the love. Thank you for tuning in. And until next time, you guys keep your head up and happy holidays to you. Peace.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, everyone.